So this Toyota Tacoma came into our shop needing some front end work and a fresh alignment. So today we're on to the alignment. We're gonna show you guys how an alignment works from start to finish and why it's so important. First step, we start with the reflectors. So these are the reflectors. Basically each one has its own unique combination of dots and an X on it. And the computer is sending a laser out, seeing the reflections back, and that's how it calculates how the wheels are angled and tilted in relation to each other wheel, and that's how it can calculate your alignment. So first step is to throw these things onto the wheels. So once we have all the reflectors on, then we can get into our computer here and start our alignment. So the first page is going to be showing exactly how the vehicle is lined up on the rack. So you can see in these, you can see each reflector is pulsing. Each pulse is when the laser is, blasting out. So you can see that all four are in the middle of the frame. We can change that by raising and lowering the actual racks, and you can see how it goes up and down. So we want to make sure that they're somewhat in the middle so that the computer has a good sight line on all the reflectors. Cool thing about our alignment rack is instead of having a big fixed screen, we actually have an iPad, so I can just bring it with me. So the next step is to get the computer to understand how these are all oriented, and to do that we roll the vehicle forward and back. So we follow these lines, and I'm just going to roll the truck forward and just do exactly what it says. Once we have done our rollback compensation, then we got to put the brakes on so this thing can't move around. So start the truck just so that the brake booster is boosting. And then we have this fancy dancy thing that will hold the brake pedal. Now we can pull the pins and allow the turntables to turn. So the difference between a normal 4-post lift and an alignment rack is that the alignment one has these turntables in it and slip plates in the back. So basically a turntable allows the front wheels to move completely independently so that the truck never has bind. If you just did it on the floor and tried to align your truck, the tires would be gripping the ground and it wouldn't move freely and you wouldn't get accurate measurements. These move super easy so that there's no weird binding on them. Same with the back. Doesn't matter on a Tacoma because it has a solid rear axle, but if you're in a car or something that has independent rear suspension, those rear tables, they slip as well so that you can align the rear. The next step is we want to do a side-to-side compensation. That's how the computer can calculate how the caster's working. So we just follow this, we turn to the right, and then we'll turn to the left, and then we'll center it up after. So the next step, and maybe the most important, is to make sure that the steering wheel is perfectly centered. This is at least the part that everybody notices, and then we lock it in with our handy dandy steering wheel locky dealio. Click that into the seat so it can't move. And that looks pretty centered to me. So we're on to the alignment now. Now that we've done all of our compensations and everything, the computer knows exactly what our alignment is currently. So you see that we are towed way out. Our camber is actually pretty close, honestly. And then our caster is pretty wacky side to side. So we're super high on this side and then kind of low on this side. Being able to read these numbers is part of the art of being able to do an alignment really well, because you have your green sections, but a lot of the time being in the green is not where you actually want to be, depending on how you want your truck to handle. So because we're an off-road shop that works in Toyotas, we know that having a higher caster is going to drive a lot better than the recommended specs, because the recommended specs is like 1.6 degrees caster, which is very low. And the way caster works, the lower your caster, the twitchier the steering is gonna be. So it's gonna turn in really fast and it's gonna be a lot twitchier at high speeds. If you have high caster numbers, that's tilting the wheels forward, and then you're gonna have a slower turn in. It's gonna feel way more stable at higher speeds, and that's what we want when we're doing an off-road truck. Camber and toe are pretty easy concepts to understand. Toe is how your tires are angled in towards each other. So if this one was pointed in, that would be toe in. If it was pointed out, it would be toe out. That has a big impact on tire wear and how your truck drives. Also, you can have toe that's in spec, but if they're both this way, your truck will still drive straight, but your steering wheel will just be off. So toe is the bit that kind of lines your steering wheel up. The next one is camber. Camber is also pretty simple to understand. That is just the angle of the tires like this. So if you have negative camber where the bottom of the tire is sticking out like this, then it's gonna wear the inside of the tire. And if you have the opposite, you have positive camber, so it's angled like this, you're gonna wear the outside of your tire. Typically you want your camber somewhere around 0. We usually go with the preferred specs from the manufacturer for this. But in dirt, there's different ways you can use camber to make your truck handle slightly differently. But we like to have good tire wear, so we try and line it up pretty neutral. So one other thing about toe is that you usually want a little bit of toe in, because as the vehicle accelerates, it wants to push the toe out. So you're compensating by having it just slightly in. But I've been seeing more and more vehicles that want a little bit of toe out. I think that has a lot to do with Ackerman angle, which is a little bit hard to explain. But Ackerman angle is basically, if this is like, if you're looking at the tires from the bottom, it's how they turn. Because as you do a circle, you know, the inside tires are doing a smaller circle and the outside tires are doing a bigger circle. So you want your outside tire to turn less than the inside tire, so you're not scrubbing. That's for a daily vehicle. If you look at like high performance race cars, they're gonna have a totally different setup, but that is getting way too mathy for this video. Of all 3 alignment specs that we're looking at, the most hard to understand one is caster. Caster is basically, if you imagine your spindle is in here and it's attached at the ball joint at the top and then it's attached at the ball joint at the bottom. Caster is essentially the angle at which those 2 ball joints are at. So usually you're gonna have a positive caster, so they're gonna be angled like this. So the amount that they're angled, that's your caster number. So if you imagine an imaginary line drawn from your upper ball joint through your lower ball joint to the ground, the difference between the center of your contact patch with your tire and where that line lands on the ground, that is your caster essentially. So the further behind that line, the contact patch of the tire is, the more positive caster you have. And so what's happening is, a lot of people explain it like a shopping cart. A shopping cart actually has extremely high caster, and that's why the tires are always pointed in the right direction. Okay, so we got a shopping cart here. So this is the pivot point right here, and it's going straight down. So basically the caster, the pivot point is here on the ground, but the tire contact is here. So what happens is, because your contact patch is behind the caster line, we'll call it, the tire drags, right? So it's following the caster line. So it stays behind. That's what gives you stable steering and stable handling at high speed. So a low caster, a negative caster, would be as if we had the wheels like this. So now our point is here, but our contact patch is ahead. So now try keeping it going straight. It's super twitchy. You gotta like really work to keep it going straight. So that's how caster works. It's the easiest way to explain it. And hopefully that's helpful. Working on this Tacoma, he had seized lower control arms, which is very common on the Toyotas. So we've just replaced the lower control arms, and we've used SBC cam bolts. Basically the way it works is you have this cam here, so as you turn it, the cam moves and it pushes against these tabs. As it pushes on the tabs, it's gonna push the arm out or in. If you've watched our video about the weakest link of the Toyota's front suspension, these tabs are a big part of it. Basically, these tabs like to fold flat and then your alignment can just slide side to side even though it's tightened. So check out that video if you want to know more about that and how to fix it. So as you can see, I can move the cam side to side and it's pushing this bolt. You can see it's pulling it in or out. So that's how we're gonna adjust the alignment. So we have two cams. We have the one in the front and we have the one in the back. Basically, they're both gonna affect the other, but you'll get more caster and less camber out of the back one because it's a longer point here. So it's trying to turn the arm forward. The front one, you'll get more camber than caster because it's a straighter shot. So as it goes out, it's gonna push this out and give you more camber. So we're gonna use these and try and find that balance to where we have it aligned how we like. What I'm doing is I'm trying to balance camber and caster between these two cams. We're aiming for like 3.5 to 4 degrees of caster. That's what our preference is and how we align it. So if you took your truck to just a random alignment shop that they just do everything, right? They're gonna be aiming for green. We're not aiming for green. We are aiming for custom alignment that handles the best off-road based on what we know from years and years of experience of driving these trucks off-road. So we're actually gonna be aligning the truck with custom specs that are gonna push the tire forward, giving you more clearance from your tire to the firewall, and also giving you higher caster than recommended so that you have a much more stable and planted drive when you're off-road and on the highway. So that's the difference between us as a specialist with Toyotas in off-road specifically compared to a normal shop. But you can ask other shops to do this, but some will say yes, some will say no. You never really know, but whenever a truck comes into our shop, this is what we're doing. So there is a whole big other topic about how to get more clearance from your tire to the firewall, but we're gonna do a separate video on that topic, talking about the lower control arm and the upper control arm and how they affect tire clearance. So get subscribed if you wanna see that video, and we'll be coming out with it as soon as we can. So I've gotten the passenger side sort of within spec, just roughly. Typically you do the caster and the camber first, and then you'll do the toe last. But if your toe is out by a pretty big margin, like here it's 2 degrees out, I'm actually going to adjust that before I lock in our caster and camber, just so that, because if you have big toe adjustment, it will affect your camber and caster a bit. If it's just small, it's not gonna make a change. So I'm gonna get that locked in, but first I want to jump over to the driver's side and just make sure that I can get it sort of similar before I start really fine tuning, because sometimes you'll find that if there's a bent knuckle or a bent frame or something's tweaked, you won't actually be able to get the same spec on one side or the other. And then you'll be stuck and you have to change the other one to bring it back or whatever. So I'm just trying to get it really roughly in the right space so that I know that it's all gonna line up properly, and then I'll start tweaking to get it super finely tuned. So we can get more caster by pushing this one forward. That's gonna bring this ball joint forward, and we can pull this one in, and that's also gonna bring this forward. So the more you bring this forward, the higher the angle is to the upper ball joint, and that is how you get more caster. So you see that we're almost maxed out, and we're at 5.2 degrees. So that's way more than enough. So we're gonna actually dial it back the other way, and we're gonna bring it back down to closer to like 4. So now you can see that we've got our caster sort of similar, we've got our camber pretty similar as well. So now I'm gonna jump over to toe, get the toe more or less in spec, and then I'll go back to caster and camber and get them dialed in and fine-tuned. So this is always the scary part when you have a truck that's a little bit crustier, is whether these actually come loose or not. So we're about to find out. Ooh. Ah! Oopsies, that's why it has a big rugged case, isn't it? Okay. So what's happened here is we've spun the jam nut, but it's attached to the tie rod still. So I gotta get that separated. For some reason, these tie rods are kind of this weird in-between size that doesn't quite fit. But so it often spins on there, but we'll get her working. Hopefully. Oh yeah, you can see it's spinning on there. So I think I'm gonna need to bust out the heat. There we go. Oh. Okay, so we struggled with this thing for a little while, but I ended up just replacing it. It was all galled up and messed up. So now look how freely it spins, so easy. And I got that one loose, so that one's okay. So we are gonna move on now, back to where we were, square one. I don't really remember what we were talking about, but I believe it was alignments. So basically, we're at the stage now where, okay, our spec here is way out. My little 15 mil. You can see our toe here for this wheel. We're up at 2 degrees, so I'm just backing it out. It's towed in right now, so I'm extending it to tow it out. Getting closer. Oh, there we go. So the spec for this calls for 0.09 degrees, and we will go probably around 0.10, 0.1. Didn't take much. There we go. So in the road, you have the crown of the road. So if this is like this is the lane you're driving in, and I'm driving in this lane, the crown is like this. It's higher in the middle, and that makes the car want to veer to the right, to the ditch. So what we do is we put the caster a little lower on the driver's side and a little higher on the passenger side, and that's gonna combat that. If that doesn't do it, you can also fight it with your camber, but prefer to do it with some caster. So we usually do like 0.2 degrees more caster on the passenger side. So now that we're in the ballpark here, we're gonna tune it in, we're gonna get the camber dialed to how they want it, and we're gonna get our caster dialed to how we want it, and then we should be good. We've got our specs pretty much how we want them. So the next step is to take it for test drive. So we just pull the reflectors off. I've tightened everything up, made sure it's all nice and tight. And yeah, we're just gonna pull the reflectors off, drop on the ground, and I'll take it for a quick spin. And we'll see if it goes straight, if the steering wheel is centered, all that stuff. And if it is, we're golden. If not, then we'll have to come back and do some adjustments. So let's take it for a rip. Test drive, and we want to see if the steering wheel is straight and if it veers to one side or the other. So once we get to the top of this little hill and corner here, we can do a quick test. So the steering wheel is definitely off a little bit, but that's easily fixed. It's going pretty straight. I think our alignment's good. We just gotta adjust the toe a little bit to center the steering wheel because it's just slightly off to the side. And then we should be good. Both the wheels are pointed slightly to the left. So if I adjust the toe, maybe a half crank to the right on each, then we should be centered, and we'll do another test drive and we'll see if the steering wheel is straight. So let's get to that. Extend this one. It's gonna move this tire over. So I'm just gonna tighten that up now. And then I'll do the same on the other side, but I'm gonna bring it in instead of out. Okay, so that should be it. And now the steering wheel hopefully is straight. If not, we can tweak it again. All right, so that's it. We've successfully aligned this truck, drives great. Hopefully this video is helpful for you guys, informative, whatever. If you liked it, that's awesome. Hit the like button, love it. If you didn't like it, don't bother subscribing. Leave me a comment about why you hated this video, and I'll tell you why you're wrong. Okay, bye.